The iron doors slammed shut behind him. The sound echoed through the narrow hallway of Pennsylvania State Prison. Subu Vedam, a 28-year-old man with tired eyes and trembling hands, took his first steps into the place he'd call home for the next 4 decades, a place he never belonged. The guards didn't look at him. The other inmates watched silently, as if they already knew this man was broken before he even began his sentence. Subu whispered to himself, "I didn't do it. I swear I didn't." But nobody cared. The papers had already called him the accountant who snapped. The jury believed it. The judge sealed it. And now, this quiet man who came to America chasing dreams was being locked away for a murder he didn't commit. The cell door clanged shut, and in that moment, Subu realized what true silence felt like. It wasn't peace. It was the sound of his life disappearing. 43 years later, when his innocence was finally proven, reporters flooded the prison gates. The world wanted to hear from the man who spent nearly half a century behind bars for someone else's crime. Cameras flashed, microphones crowded around him. Subu smiled faintly. Freedom had finally come, but just as he stepped outside, 2 men in black suits approached. "Subramanyam Vedam?" one asked, flashing a badge. "You're under arrest. Immigration and Customs Enforcement." Subu's smile froze. His heart dropped. After 43 years in prison, he was being taken again this time, not as a murderer, but as an illegal immigrant. And as the crowd shouted questions and confusion erupted, Subu was pushed into the back of a government van. The door slammed. Darkness again. The story of how he got there, how an innocent man became a convict, began on a cold night in 1982 in the quiet town of Norristown, Pennsylvania. Back then, Subu was just another dreamer. He had come from India 2 years earlier. The few who did told him to move on. Yet there was one thing he couldn't move on from, a strange detail buried in the case files. The surveillance footage from the night of the murder had been accidentally erased. No one ever saw who entered the bank. Years passed. His hair turned gray. His mother died before he could prove his name clean. And still, he held on to hope. In 2005, a new warden arrived, a woman named Angela Ruiz, who had a reputation for reforming the system. She read Subu's file and was struck by the inconsistencies. "No DNA, no weapon, just a fingerprint," she murmured. Something didn't add up. Angela contacted an innocence advocacy group based in Philadelphia. They took one look at Subu's file and agreed. The case needed to be reopened. By 2018, forensic technology had advanced far beyond what was available in the 80s. The team managed to recover partial prints from the envelope of missing deposit slips found in the same office, prints that didn't belong to Subu or the victim. Then came the real shocker. The print matched a man named Michael Klein, a former employee of the same bank who'd disappeared shortly after the murder. He'd been quietly living under a new identity in Ohio when police tracked him down, Klein confessed. He said Harris caught him embezzling money and threatened to expose him. In panic, he attacked Harris with a paperweight and fled. Subu had nothing to do with it, he admitted. After 43 years, the truth was finally out. Subu's conviction was overturned. The prison gates opened. The world welcomed him back as a symbol of survival and faith. But just when everyone thought his nightmare was over, just when he breathed his first real breath of freedom, ICE took him. Because while he was locked away for a crime he didn't commit, his visa had expired decades ago. Now, after losing nearly half a century or two, Rachel frowned, flipping through the papers. Then we'll have to build a humanitarian case. Public pressure, emotional impact. It might convince the court. A few weeks later, a hearing was scheduled. Cameras lined the courthouse steps. Protesters held signs, "Justice for Subu," and "Free the innocent man," again. The story had caught fire across social media. Celebrities tweeted, lawyers volunteered, and activists rallied outside ICE offices. Inside the courtroom, Subu sat quietly beside Rachel. Across from them was the government attorney, expressionless, reading from a file. "Your Honor, while we acknowledge the wrongful conviction, Mr. Vedam has overstayed his visa by more than 4 decades. His legal status expired long ago." Rachel stood. "Your Honor, my client's imprisonment was not his fault. He couldn't renew his visa from a prison cell. The government failed him once. We cannot fail him again." The judge listened, flipping through the thick case file. "This court acknowledges the extraordinary circumstances," he said. "However, immigration law is clear. Mr. Vedam remains subject to removal unless granted special status." Subu's heart sank again. It felt like the walls were closing in, just as they had 43 years ago. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions. "Subu, how does it feel to face deportation after being declared innocent?" He didn't answer. He just looked at the sky, the same gray clouds that had followed him since that morning of his release. That night, alone in his detention cell, he whispered, "Maybe freedom was never meant for me." But fate wasn't done yet. 2 days later, Rachel rushed into the detention center with her phone in hand. "Subu, look at this," she said breathlessly. On her screen was a live news broadcast. A federal prosecutor had just been caught falsifying evidence in multiple old cases. The same prosecutor, W. Subu frowned. "Clean what up? The story, the headlines, the protests. You're becoming a symbol, and symbols can be messy." The van slowed, pulling into an underground garage beneath an old federal building in downtown Philadelphia. The air smelled of oil and rainwater. The men opened the door and motioned for him to step out. Inside, they led him down a narrow corridor to a dimly lit office. A man in his 60s sat behind a large desk, papers neatly stacked, an American flag hanging behind him. His nameplate read, "Director Alan Pierce." "Mr. Vedam," Pierce began. "Please sit." Subu hesitated, then lowered himself into the chair. Pierce leaned forward, folding his hands. "You've become quite the story, haven't you? 43 years in prison, innocent all along, and now the world wants to know what happens next." Subu's voice was calm but cold. "They want justice." Pierce smiled thinly. "Justice is complicated. The Department of Justice can't exactly issue a press release saying, 'We destroyed a man's life.' So here's what's going to happen." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a single page titled, "Confidential Settlement Agreement." "You'll sign this," Pierce said. "It grants you full release, no deportation, no further custody. In exchange, you agree not to sue the state or federal government. We'll arrange quiet relocation, somewhere peaceful." Subu stared at the paper. "You want me to stay silent?" Pierce nodded. "Let's call it closure. You've suffered enough. Take this and live the rest of your life in peace." The pen lay between them like a loaded weapon. Subu picked it up, his hands trembling. He'd dreamed of freedom for decades, but this didn't feel like freedom. It felt like being buried alive again, only this time under paperwork instead of prison walls. He looked up slowly. "No," he said. Pierce's eyes hardened. "Excuse me, If we show them this agreement, it'll prove they're silencing you." For the first time in years, Subu felt something rise in him, something stronger than fear. "Let's do it." Over the next week, Rachel gathered files, transcripts, and old evidence. She called journalists, scheduled interviews, and prepared a press conference. The public was already angry about his treatment. This would ignite a firestorm. But then, something went wrong. On the morning of the press conference, Rachel didn't show up. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Subu waited at the cafe where they agreed to meet, hours passing as rain poured outside. Finally, he walked back to the motel, trying to stay calm. Maybe she was delayed. But when he opened his room door, the sight froze him. The place was ransacked, papers scattered across the floor, drawers pulled out, the brown envelope gone. His fake eye lay on the bed, snapped in half. Subu's chest tightened. He ran to the window, but the parking lot was empty, only rain, falling harder than before. He picked up the broken ID and whispered, "They found me." Somewhere in the distance, a car door slammed. He turned toward the sound, and as headlights cut through the storm, a voice echoed in his head, Pierce's cold words. "The system protects itself." The lights grew brighter, closer, until the glare filled the room. Subu's heart pounded. Was it the press, Rachel, or the men in suits again? He stepped forward, trembling, trying to see through the rain-soaked glass. Then the light stopped just outside his door. A shadow moved behind the curtain, and before he could speak, there was a single knock. And just like that silence. No one knows who stood behind that door or what happened to Subu Vedam next. Was it justice finally coming for him? Or the system trying to bury him one last time? If you want to see the last part of this story, comment "continue" below, and make sure you subscribe, like, and share this video, because the truth isn't over yet.